Yeah.
Okay. David, did you want to do an intro or?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just say a few words. I'll say welcome to the Community Air Protection Program workshop. This program is for improving air quality in disadvantaged communities and low-income areas by incentivizing projects that will reduce emissions of pollutants within those communities. So we're going to have a presentation and then an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation. So I'll introduce Tyrone, who is an air quality planner here at the district. And he will be presenting to you today on the program. So take it away, Ty.
All right. Thanks, David. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tyrone Bell, as David introduced. I'm an air quality planner here at the Monterey Bay Air Resources District. So welcome to our Community Air Protection Program workshop. I'm also going to refer to the program as CAP. So as David explained, I will be going over program goals, our eligibility requirements, and a few of our guidelines for the program. And then we're going to ask for your feedback on project prioritization at the end of this presentation. So this is an opportunity for community members such as yourself to share your ideas for what sorts of projects you would like to see implemented in your community. And then feel free to ask questions at any time. But if you have just general comments or specific project ideas, please hold those until the end of the presentation. Then we'll be able to discuss those. Okay, to begin, I'll highlight the legislation that laid the foundations for CAP. So there are three primary bills that were adopted, the first being in 2012. This bill, Senate Bill 535, requires the state's portion of cap and trade auction proceeds to be used to achieve additional reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. So the first bill, it required at least 25% of proceeds be allocated to projects providing a benefit to disadvantaged communities and at least 10% to projects located within disadvantaged communities. So there is a slight differentiation there. So then subsequently in 2016, Senate Bill 1550 that increased the location requirement from 10% to 25%. And then as you can see, it added a requirement to invest also in low-income communities. And then the third key legislation is Assembly Bill 617. So AB 617, it was authored by Assembly Member Christina Garcia to address disproportionate impacts of air pollution in environmental justice communities. It was signed into law by Governor Brown in 2017, requiring local air districts to take specific actions to monitor air quality and reduce air pollution in these communities. So in response, CARB established the Community Air Protection Program, which is funded through the California Climate Investments. State law requires 25% of funding be allocated to projects in disadvantaged communities and at least an additional 10% benefiting low-income households or communities. And then later on, CARB actually enhanced those standards by requiring at least 70% for disadvantaged communities and 80% for low-income communities. So what are disadvantaged and low-income communities? So Senate Bill 535 defines disadvantaged communities based on, quote, geographic, socioeconomic, public health, and environmental hazard criteria. So Cal EPA, along with the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment and California Air Resources Board, co-developed Cal EnviroScreen to identify these low-income and disadvantaged communities. So they use data from federal and state sources. Each of California's approximately 8,000 census tracts, and then they scored and ranked these using a quantitative method considering multiple pollution sources and stressors and vulnerability to populations. So each of these 20 specific indicators, as you see in the chart here, they make up 4 components that fall under 2 broad groups: pollution burden and population characteristics. So each indicator receives a score, and then the overall score is calculated by adding up these individual indicator scores of each subcomponent and then multiplying the pollution burden and population characteristic scores. And then so this methodology is also based, as I mentioned earlier, on federal and state data, but they also considered scientific literature as well as risk assessment and established risk scoring systems. So for eligible communities, as I mentioned, as disadvantaged communities, these are census tracts within the top 25% of the overall score. These communities are disproportionately affected by environmental pollution and other hazards that can lead to negative public health effects, exposure, or environmental degradation. Also included in these areas are areas with concentrations of people that are of low income, high unemployment, low levels of home ownership, high rent burden, sensitive populations, or low levels of educational attainment. And then here, this is a map we have of the Cal EnviroScreen map, which identifies these census tracts. Let's reload here. You can zoom in our district. So the big things here, the map on the left, if you click on each individual census tract, it does break down. Let's go to this one. It does break down like how the area was scored. As you can see, the indicators are all listed here, and then along with their scores. And so, like I said, these are all calculated, and then the top 25% are considered disadvantaged communities, which is indicated on this map on the right. The pink areas, that's your disadvantaged and low income communities. You don't see any red because that's also included in the pink areas. The blue is the low income communities, and then the yellow is a half-mile buffer zone. So the areas we're really focusing on are the disadvantaged communities. As you can see, they're located in Watsonville area, portions of Marina, and then pretty much the southern and southeast portion of Salinas into the Sparkles area. So these are our funding prioritizations. As I just said, we want to mostly focus and prioritize disadvantaged communities, followed by low-income communities, and then community identified projects. And I'll discuss what those are in a few slides here. And then we want to look at zero emission projects. And then finally, we consider the project cost effectiveness. So this is our available funding. So currently we will be going into year 5. As you can see, we have $1.4 million, but we can continue to use the surplus we have in our previous years. So as you can see, in year 2, we still have about $80,000 remaining from that funding. And year 3, we're kind of in the process of contracting those out. So we haven't really figured out exactly what we have left. But basically we have at least 1.4 million going into the next season. For CAP project categories, these are the eligible categories. So mobile and stationary source projects, they generally refer to replacements. For example, replacing a diesel powered bus with an electric one. Public school projects should decrease exposure and address indoor and outdoor sources that may potentially affect the health of school children. And again, community identified projects, they must have a substantial community benefit and show specific community support. And this is just further examples of past projects we've granted within our district. So again, mobile sources, they include off-road equipment, tractors, loaders, forklifts, harvesters, and as well as zero emission vehicles. These are some of the vehicles we have funded. So electric refuse hauler in the top right there, and then a couple of shuttles, and then looks like a medium or a heavy duty truck. Stationary sources, So these are typically like our tier 0 generators that are should be used for emergency purposes. But they can also include our charging infrastructure, as well as the agricultural irrigation pumps. So we can electrify those. This map on the right, it just highlights the generators that we know of within our district. So they're indicated by all of these red dots. And I'm showing you this because, again, just as a quick reminder, this is a community-driven program. So we're here to seek your prioritization. And we feel like this might be an area we want to concentrate on, placing some of these tier 0 diesel engines. We also can provide grants for public schools, and consistent with the California Constitution, only non-sectarian and or non-denominational schools under the exclusive control of the officers of the public schools are eligible. So we can't do like public Catholic schools, for example. Some common project types are transportation, air filtration systems, lawn and garden equipment, and replacing classroom furniture, classroom wood furniture. And each project type, now they do come with specific requirements. So for example, in the case of air filtration systems, the air filter panel must be a higher MERV rating than the existing panel and be at least a MERV 14. Standalone filters are restricted also to 45 decibels. So standalone filters are like what you see in this image that you typically can place in a room. And also, as far as furniture, like I mentioned, we can replace composite wood furniture with no added formaldehyde, NAFs, or ultra low emitting formaldehyde, ULEF furniture. And then a part of that, if that's the route you want to go, you must solicit at least 2 competitive bids. And just want to quickly highlight some of the school districts we were able to fund electric school buses for in our area. And this is an area we're continuing to make progress in and replacing some of these old diesel buses with electric ones. Okay, so to touch on our community identified projects. So community identified projects, they must have community support, obviously, and an approved what's called a project plan that outlines the emissions reduction and exposure reduction benefits or other benefits that the project will provide to a community. Community support is ensuring community members have sufficient opportunities to voice concerns or support for a project at public meetings, such as this. So this may be demonstrated with documentation, such as meeting minutes, letters, emails, and other public outreach. The project plan must include a method for quantifying or calculating reductions of criteria air pollutants or toxic air contaminants. Now, additionally, there should be a baseline or benchmark for comparison, as well as cost-benefit calculations. Projects intended to demonstrate the efficacy of an advanced technology must include a detailed and contracted scope of work with verifiable milestones and associated incremental pay schedules to ensure fiscal responsibility. Okay. And then finally, there are other components that community identified projects and requirements for project plans that I can't really go into in the short workshop, but if you have specific questions, definitely reach out to us and we'll have our contact info at the end of this presentation. Which is right now. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, I'll be happy to take those. Nope. Okay, well, thank you for attending our workshop.
All right.